Coming up on another exciting installment of That Was a Show? Maybe This Time Was a Show. This 1995 sitcom is about the comings and goings of a family-owned coffee shop and stars the likes of Marie Osmond, Ashley Johnson, Amy Hill, Craig Ferguson, and, saving the best for last of course, Betty White. It's part sarcastic Gen X hangout show, and part saccharine kid-friendly family show a la TGIF. Brynn, Aaron, and Barry grab a seat at the counter, order a cookie and a cuppakino, and gab about why this show turned out to be half-baked. We grew up during peak sitcom, Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince, but those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show? That was a show? The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Burney,
Aaron Yeager,
and Andrew Helmer as Barry.
a Radio Gizmo production.
Welcome back to another episode of That Was a Program.
a show, Barry. A show.
A show. A television show.
A situational comedy.
Yes. Yes.
A situation comedy. Do people actually know that that's what that means? Like a sitcom is a situation comedy?
I'm guessing 60% of people know.
Okay, well,
I think it's situational, not situation.
Situational, yeah.
I thought it was situation.
Either way,
Whatever.
I think it means the same thing.
It's very, it's something we could easily look up, but I'm not going to. And my phone's all the way over there.
I once
Yeah.
did look up the origin, like the earliest known sitcoms, and they actually go back to radio
Okay.
before
Makes sense.
before migrating to television. And I can't remember what the earliest TV sitcom was, although
Yeah.
the one that often gets referenced is The Honeymooners, at least in an American context. But I don't think that was truly the first. I think there were other earlier shows.
That feels, because like The Honeymooners feels like a show that it feels like it's very entrenched into the genre already. Like it
Yeah.
feels like it knows what it is.
Yeah.
Like The Honeymooners isn't trying to be The Honeymooners isn't trying to break ground. It's like a prototypical sitcom,
Exactly,
sure.
yeah.
But there must have been some shit that preceded it.
Yeah.
But
Shows that were trying to figure it out.
Yeah, why would any of us know this? None of us host a podcast about sitcoms.
Nope.
Well, anyway, let's get into the show that we're going to be talking about today.
Maybe this time.
So before I do the conversational show setup, I'll just do the cold open, get
Okay.
that out of the way.
All right.
You got to leave all this in.
Yeah. This is how we do it. This is how the sausage is made. Brynn, Aaron, and Barry grab a seat at the counter, order a cookie and a cuppakino, and gab about why this show turned out to be half-baked.
Is that an Arrested Development
Yes,
reference?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
I don't know if
it's-
people out there will get that automatically.
They better.
So,
They better.
Cuppakino was an Arrested Development
It's
reference.
called a cappuccino.
Yeah.
And you won't believe what it costs.
I believe,
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up, but I believe that flashback in Arrested Development was specifically to 1995, which is what got me thinking about it, where it was,
Was
like
it?
that was becoming
Yeah.
super trendy. It's either 93 or 95, something like that. Yeah.
I can't
That's
remember
funny.
if it's cappuccino or cuppakino.
I think it was
I think
Cappuccino.
it's cappuccino.
Yeah.
Oh
Coming
my
up
God.
after the break, I'll tell you all about the trendy new drink that's sweeping the nation. It's called a cappuccino, and wait till you hear what it costs.
So Arrested Development
That's
was
my
a much
closest
better
memory
show.
of it.
Yeah.
So before we get mired in talking about a much better show again, let me tell you all about Maybe This Time.
Please, I'm dying to know.
Sorry, I'm just very distracted by Gizmo. She's being very cute, and I really want her to come sit with us.
Gizmo being our executive
she's
producer.
doing producing. She's producing.
There's a lot of bookkeeping. There's a lot of management, like
she's
background.
Her scratching post.
A lot of back office management that this cat is responsible for.
She has to deal with my booking agent, and I never answer the phone.
Yeah.
So,
all right, sorry guys.
Maybe This Time is an ABC sitcom that ran from September 15th, 1995 to February 17th, 1996, with a total of 18 episodes. It stars Marie Osmond as a recently divorced single mother who's helping to run the family bakery and coffee shop in a suburb of Philadelphia. Her 11-year-old daughter is played by sitcom mainstay Ashley Johnson, and her saucy mother is played by the incomparable Betty White. Rounding out the cast is Amy Hill as the gossipy owner of a local pawn shop, who's always hanging out at the coffee shop, and Craig Ferguson, who works in the bakery. We watched 2 episodes, the pilot and episode 15. By that point, a young Dane Cook had been added to the cast, and Craig Ferguson, though still credited, seems to be gone. Okay, so I'll launch right into the plot of the pilot.
Please do.
And then I'll describe episode 15 later when we get to it. So.
Can't wait.
Yeah. In the pilot, episode 1, we meet all 3 generations of women in this family and get to know this little cafe. Each character is a very specific mid-90s sitcom archetype. Marie Osmond's Julia is the outspoken feminist businesswoman. Her daughter Gracie is very witty and precocious, and Grandma Shirley, played by Betty White, is cynical, sarcastic, and always doling out retrograde 1950s era advice. It's time for the annual rent negotiation with the landlord, an elderly man who is anything but a gentleman. Julia is new to joining the business, and she's dismayed to find out that her mother has been apparently avoiding rent increases for 20 years by way of elaborate flirtations with the landlord. Shirley doesn't see anything wrong with this. In fact, she quite enjoys it. When Julia puts a stop to this demeaning practice and butts in on the rent negotiation, the rent goes up $500. She then decides to negotiate with the landlord's daughter, a businesswoman her own age, thinking that will make things go better, and it goes up $1,000. In the end, Craig Ferguson turns on his own charm and gets things right back on track. And I'm sure we'll have lots to discuss with that.
I was very well summarized.
And one last little bit here. So this episode actually has an A story, a B story, that being Kay getting Logan to break up her daughter from some other young guy in exchange for a fancy golf club, and a C story, Gracie wants a bicycle and her mom won't buy her one. And they all tie together in the end, almost like a Seinfeld episode, but in a very, very low-key, very, very low-stakes, and not especially funny sort of way. And there you have it.
Yep, that's it. So I'm going to just start off by saying something that I'm sure I'm going to mention a hell of a lot on this.
Go for it.
Young Craig Ferguson is a fucking babe.
Right?
He is a slab of beef.
Yeah.
His accent is so thick at this point, and he's so charming.
He's just the best.
He's the best. He's really funny in this. Being funny specifically for most of the performers isn't really the show's problem. I mean, Brynn kind of nailed it when we were talking before, but it's just kind of bland and boring.
Yeah.
But Betty White's still great. Craig Ferguson's still great.
Yeah.
That doesn't really, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Because I was really curious about the Craig Ferguson of it all. He actually just wasn't in that episode that we watched.
So he is still with the show.
He's still on the show.
Yeah. He's still around. They didn't replace him with Dane Cook. He just wasn't in that episode.
Okay.
I went through a few more just to see. I was like, what happened? And he's around in the last episode, and still.
Is there like a will they or won't they with him and Marie Osmond's character, or is that
not really? There's one episode. The one episode I kind of started watching a little, like Betty White walks in on them, and he'd been sleeping in the back of the thing, and Marie Osmond catches him, and like Betty White comes in and he's like zipping up his pants, and like it's a whole thing where she keeps having to explain to her mom like, no, it's not what you think, and like she just never once for a minute believes that they are. She's like, no, she's like, no, I know, I know.
Daughter's lame.
Her daughter's really lame, and Craig Ferguson is so out of her league.
And she's just, the only thing Betty White keeps saying is like, I don't think that's what's going on. If it was, yay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I can picture the scene where the daughter's like, no, this isn't what's going on, and the mother's like, I know, but I wish it was.
Yeah. For your
It's funny
sake.
because Ferguson's character in this seems like he should be like a hunky deadbeat.
Yeah.
And he sort of is, but he's not really like sleazy, like that bad. Like he's just very charming. He likes helping out.
He seems like a sweet guy. Like
he's a sweet guy.
At least based on the pilot, he's not a deadbeat. He's a mimbo.
He's a mimbo.
Yeah, he's a mimbo, and I think he's like there's kind of an implication that he's a bit of a womanizer, but not in like a sleazy way. He just likes
not
the
a sleazy
ladies.
way at all. Yeah.
I think it's almost like the ladies like him, and he's not gonna turn that down.
Yeah,
he just doesn't like to disappoint them.
He's a people pleaser,
and he seems to be like, at least in some of the bits that I kind of briefly flashed on, he seems to be like. He seems to have a bit of a sweet relationship with Ashley Johnson's character, so he's a bit of a male role model.
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of funny that he's not like a love interest, but like I think it's just that like, and this is kind of the problem with the show, like, Marie Osmond is the very definition of fine.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing really going on.
Yeah.
Like her character is like kind of annoying.
I feel like it's a weird choice. Like I feel like she has a very specific demographic.
Yeah.
And she is a specific, she is a very wholesome person and should be in wholesome things.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I feel like Betty White has a certain edge to her, even though she's like this beloved figure.
Yeah.
She has like this ability to be in edgy things, and so does Craig Ferguson. Like they're both like, it's funny because her and Craig Ferguson have a very similar appeal. Like they're both like beloved characters, like beloved like people, but they're very like, they can be in things that have a little more edge and spice to them, but like Marie Osmond absolutely not. And like even Ashley Johnson is like, as a child,
she has more edge.
She has Ashley Johnson's doing way more with this performance.
I don't believe Marie Osmond is being a divorcee, single woman, like dating and like running a bit. Like I just don't believe any of it. It's just weird to me. I feel like
I'm glad you brought that up.
And that maybe that's kind of mean and judgy, but I'm just like,
it's just it's not in the performance.
Yeah. This was maybe the most interesting aspect of this show. Not interesting in a way that makes me want to watch more of it, but just interesting in terms of like deconstructing what's going on in the way the show is designed, which is the thing that I kind of touched on in my cold open, which is that, and this might be the first time I've seen a show try to do this, and maybe now I know why you shouldn't do this, which is that it feels like it's trying to be a hangout show for people who are like adults or young adults, kind of like a Friends, while simultaneously being a family show, a TGIF show that's kid-friendly, like a, I don't know, let's go with Full House, whatever. It doesn't matter what the example is.
I mean, it does start as it did start as in the TGIF lineup.
So it feels like it's trying to do both, and it feels like the casting of Marie Osmond is like, let's keep this show wholesome. And then the casting of Betty White and just all the other characters in general, like the way their jokes are written, is like, but let's add just a tiny bit of sizzle to try to convince people in their 30s and 40s who are not just like babysitting children to watch this. And as a result, it fails on both fronts, because if you want to like make it a fun hangout show, you cannot make it okay for 11-year-olds to watch. And if you want to make it like a good, wholesome family show with a moral at the end, then cynical Gen Xers didn't want to watch that. I know I didn't, and I was pretty young at that time.
I remember watching this show, sidebar.
Really?
Like, I did watch
as soon as
this
we
show.
started watching it, I did too.
Yeah.
I remember it, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
because Brynn and I watched TGIF, so.
I didn't recognize this at all, probably because I didn't watch much
it
TGIF.
was on TV, and it was
Yeah, it was on
before
TV.
10 p.m. And so I watched it as a 10-year-old or whatever, like 11-year-old.
We'll get into this more when we talk about the other episode, but it felt like the pilot did not have a moral at the end. Like, it felt like the pilot was...
It felt like the moral was just flirt to get what you want.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I'm... Well, that's... I mean...
Which is wild.
I feel like we didn't really... I feel like the show never really picks a side on that. Like... I feel like you're giving me just as much evidence on either end of this argument you're making here.
My note on this is that the quote-unquote moral, which is spoken by Betty White at the climax of the story, like the thing that they officially put forward as the takeaway, is really an anti-moral. It's kind of like nihilistic selfishness is fine. It's very indicative of something we can recognize as a signature of that era. We talked about that with our last show, Ted and Nancy, where...
Nope.
Ted and Nancy, Ned and Stacy.
I'll probably cut that out. It's too embarrassing.
No, that's staying right in.
Staying
in.
What is it? Ted and...
Ned and Stacy. One of our recent favorites.
Ned and Stacy, whatever. The point is...
So Frank and Judy was no good.
Frank and Judy. The point is, Ned and Stacy was a show that all three of us agreed, like, we'd actually want to watch more of this. I actually did. I watched like 3 or 4 more episodes, and it's reasonably entertaining. And that show was very indicative of that mid-90s, like, we're not trying to put some moral button on the end of this. It's just people being people. Let's all just relax about trying to have some deeper message.
But you're definitely forgetting where this is airing, right? Like,
it's ABC.
This is ABC. This is TGIF. All of this is fitting very much within their roadmap.
I agree, and that's why it was weird in the pilot.
Yeah,
felt like the pilot was trying to do that sort of more like the non-moral sort of mid-90s show for adults, but not quite funny enough to land it.
It's probably an indication that the show probably doesn't do the moral in every episode. It probably just has occasional episodes where they do some moralizing, and then they have some other ones where they don't.
But episode 15 did.
Exactly. The closest, like, spiritual cousin to this show, which is just in what we're going to talk about, I'm sure, in talking about episode 15, is creator Michael Jacobs' other series, Boy Meets World. That is a show that is very much the same sense of humor, the same tone. It's a little edgy, but it's mostly wholesome, and it's more of a hangout show that also has some moralizing. So I think they fall very much in line, which of course brings us into episode 15.
That was, by the way, my Easter egg for why I chose this show, because I
was
thought
hoping
you'd enjoy
you did, because I knew about it.
He did that for us, Barry.
I did that for you too.
Yeah.
I knew about it.
Before we talk about 15, though, there are a few other little things that I think we could like bring up about the pilot, the things that happen in it. I mean, my first reaction to this show, before I even like got to thinking about the characters of the dialogue, was that this was the most small, almost bordering on claustrophobic set that I've seen in a long time. Like, it felt so hemmed into the counter of this coffee shop. Like, it was the least expansive visually show that I've seen in a long time, even compared to other shows that are set in that type of location. They're usually a lot bigger. They're more spacious.
It didn't really stand out to me.
I mean, the thing that jumped out at me is like how overdressed they all were for working in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I loved all of Betty White's like blouses. Those were the real star of this show, where her like very like loud patterned blouses, like I was obsessed with them. Like, they were just iconic. But as someone who's worked in a few coffee shops in my life, it's like you don't wear business suits working at the coffee shop.
No.
Which is basically what Marie Osmond was like, you know, she was in full makeup and full...
Made no sense.
You know, I was like, you're gonna get espresso and like, you
well,
know...
she doesn't seem
milk
to do
all
much.
over it, like, but who's working the counter then?
But
Like,
it's just Betty.
yeah, I guess, but even her, like they're both just like they're very overdressed and they're gonna ruin their lovely outfits.
Yeah.
Like Betty White, I was like, okay, like I believe her wearing these outfits, like she's just like that's just her, she's just a diva. But for Marie Osmond's character, I was like, nah, she just looks uptight. Like she just
looks like Marie. She looks like Marie Osmond. Like she just looks like
she looks
like she
like
didn't
she
want
should
to
be on QVC selling like costume jewelry and not.
She looks like she didn't want to dress down for the role.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Like, she wanted to be as glamorous as, and that's it. That went a long way to being like, what am I buying into here? Like, what are you guys struggling? You guys are talking about struggling, but on the other hand, like you're dressed like $1 million all the time, so it's kind of weird. Yeah. You know what else is weird about, you know, for a show where we spend so much time in this coffee shop? I don't know the name of goddamn coffee shop. You never told me.
Oh yeah, what was it called?
Don't know.
That's like that's it's branding 101. Like if your show takes off, you want to be able to sell Central Perk merchandise, you know?
Yeah.
But they didn't even go that far. They knew.
I saw it somewhere online. It's the something cafe, but like I don't remember. It wasn't memorable.
It was not memorable at all. And like the
Give me a logo. Give me a logo.
Yeah, and the whole business strategy at the beginning was like them talking about how to keep the rent low instead of like keeping their products good.
Yeah.
Like,
how about selling more than like one coffee every hour and a half? How about that as a business strategy?
How about not having how about not having like a 4-person staff who all work the exact same shift?
Yeah.
Spread it around.
The staff was almost as numerous as the patrons. Like it didn't make sense. Oh,
there were patrons?
Yeah. Now, I did think it did a good job of setting up the personalities of the characters very efficiently.
Yeah.
But those personalities were pretty two-dimensional. I can assume that would get built out gradually over time. So I'll give it, I'll cut it some slack on that. But like, it didn't leave me with any lingering questions at the end of the pilot of like, oh, I want to see where this goes next.
I was like, I have to watch another episode.
That's kind of indifferent.
I like that Ashley Johnson, who is like this, I'm not looking it up, but let's just say, like this is her 3rd or 4th time in this type of role. And she's really coming at this, hard. Like she's doing a
weird
bit
accent
of
and everything.
Doing a bit of a voice. Like she's getting deep into this role. Like the second the episode started, she's like leaning hard into this, the show starts with her talking to her grandma and she's like, oh boy, grandma. And you're just like, what's happening?
Yeah, I don't know. They told her to really ham it up, maybe because they're like, Marie Osmond doesn't have enough of a personality. We've got to like amp everybody up.
That's honestly though, that like we've been talking a lot about the supporting cast, and that this project got put together and they're like, okay, great. We have a Marie Osmond
vehicle
project for TGIF. We're going to need to pad this cast out because I don't think we can really count on her to be carrying any of this.
Yeah.
So like every other cast member on this show is doing so much heavy lifting. To call Marie Osmond the lead in this show is like not even remotely true.
It's wild because at the time it would have been a really big deal to cast her. Because
it would have.
Yeah.
But I think they would have known that they wouldn't have been getting anything.
I get it. Yeah. It's an odd thing because it's kind of like, they're trying to like bring in a broad audience. Like they're trying to like really appeal to like baby boomers who, were fans of like Donnie and Marie Osmond when they were young or whatever. And like trying to capitalize on that and then trying to get all these other heavy hitter sitcom stars and like comedians to be in this show.
Yeah.
So it's just like an odd like it was just like an odd
She was a
effort,
big
for
star.
sure.
It's not surprising that that they would put
but like
her in
so
a show.
specific,
But
such a specific type of star.
and here's the
But
thing.
she was a big star that also like didn't really carry much personality after her.
Yeah.
Like she did so many of these projects where it was just like, and Marie Osmond, and it was just like that was all anybody knew about her was like you used to be famous.
Yeah.
She was more of a like TV personality, you know, like and like a very wholesome TV personality.
And
I can't stress that enough.
I feel like part of the problem is that in the 90s, it was often typical that the lead in a sitcom would be someone who didn't come from a lot of like acting experience in this type of project, but it was often someone who came from like stand-up comedy. So even if they weren't a great actor, they were still funny. And if you rounded out the cast with like more experienced performers around them, they could still be the good central hub for those others to bounce jokes off of, because they could at least give the right reactions or like tee up everything. And that's not what you're seeing here. Like it's kind of just flat. It's not, that just doesn't pop.
Yeah.
Just briefly, the running gag through the plot of this episode, the whole, like, with the whole flirtation thing to get what you want and dropping the cutlery on, dropping the spoon on the floor and picking it up so that someone can see your butt.
Right out of the 90s.
Yeah, that was such a 90s trope.
That is in and of itself a 90s trope. And then the other trope that I really wanted to call out, though, is the first time that Betty White does it and like flirts with the landlord, picks up the spoon, like the thing that sets up that as the gag. The whole crowd in the coffee shop applauds, not just the studio audience behind the camera, but the patrons of the coffee shop turn and smile and applaud as if they are part of the audience.
I didn't even notice
and
that.
That is also a bizarre trope that I've noticed in some sitcoms, but not
That's fun.
Not
I
the
like
great
that.
ones, not the great shows, but I've noticed this in sitcoms where it's like somehow, suddenly, magically, all of them were intimately aware of what was going on in the foreground. All the background performers, as if they'd all been staring and watching, like, oh, I wonder if she's going to pull it off this year. And then she does it, and they're like, yay!
They do sort of hit that button once or twice where like Betty White does involve the patrons of the cafe at one point into like their argument about whether or not what she's doing is right, with the clearly she turns to them in a way that she knows, because they're all regulars, she expects that they all know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I guess that worked fine for me. I guess the thing that made that the whole thing end up being fine was like, I was really glad that they added the piece of business at the end where like she likes it. So like that made the whole thing feel a little less like icky, because like she's just like, no, like, you know, once a year I do this and like I have fun, like this, you know, me and this guy that I've known for a long time, we kind of do some flirting and, you know, maybe sounds like maybe they hook up or something. And like it made the whole thing, because the whole episode was like, oh, this is just weird and gross.
Yeah.
But then like when you get to the end and she's like, no, like it's something I enjoy putting this work into every year, and like we get along and we're friends, because she says like, you know, because I like him.
Yeah.
And like that made the whole thing be like, oh, okay, a little better.
I agree. That made it less creepy, and also involving Craig Ferguson in the way that they pull it off at the end.
Because his take on it is so funny.
Yeah.
How he made the oops, I dropped it funny. After me seeing that gag 400 times in my life. And just his delivery in that scene.
Yeah.
Killed me.
Yeah, he saved the plot of that episode, basically, to the extent that it works.
Yeah.
To the extent that I was so bummed that he wasn't in episode 15 because I kept being like, oh my God.
I miss Craig Ferguson.
Just come out.
Aaron, you and I briefly, you know, had a chat about this before we started, about how there's literally no exposition in the pilot whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like,
it's all very contextual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't really pick up, like, there's the description of it, where in the description of the show, they talk about how she's a recent divorcee. I didn't pick up any of that from that pilot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I didn't mind that. In fact, I kind of liked the lack of exposition.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with the show, which you identified off the top, is just that ultimately it's kind of bland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
exposition wise, I mean, within the first like 2 minutes of the show, we get that, mother, daughter, grandmother is the center of the show.
Yeah.
We, through context clues, learn that there is no husband in the picture.
Yeah.
And, we get that they run it together, and then we find out who Craig Ferguson is. And I don't know if we really need much more. I think it was nice not to get like a monologue about, I moved back here from from the big city after Hank left me. Like, I didn't need any of that. Like, the show knows that we don't need that.
I mean, okay, but you need to just like a little bit. You need a little tiny bit. Like, I know it's sloppy and lazy, and like a lot of these old sitcoms like overdo it with the exposition dump. But I would have liked just a little bit more context. Like, there's ways to do it where it's written in a clever way.
Oh, sure.
I don't know.
Oh, sure.
That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
You want it to be done efficiently, but you want it to happen kind of like in Bob and Mary or whatever the hell the last show was.
I think
Ned
and Stacy.
Ned and Stacy.
God.
You spent hours editing that.
All right. Episode 15.
Couple little tidbits.
All right.
The plaid shirts on this show are on fire.
Well, it's peak plaid shirt.
Yeah.
Peak plaid. Big plaid was really running things on TV.
Although, again, I can't stress this enough, not on Marie Osmond or Betty White.
No. Correct.
And you would think that they would wear that when making coffees.
Yeah, you would think. I also want to point out that I was delighted to see Amy Hill, who I recognize most as Kim, Frank Costanza's lover from Seinfeld. And I was delighted to see that she was like a proper recurring regular and not like a bit part that is like a one and done sort of thing.
Yeah. She's in the whole show.
She's in all of it.
Yeah. She's part of the ensemble.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's sort of like clearly Betty White's best friend.
Yeah.
Like she's a customer and like, she owns the pawn shop next door, but like, they're friends. Like,
I like her.
Yeah.
And my one other thing before we move on to the other episode was I just wanted to call out for you, Barry, because you pointed this out on Ned and Stacy.
Holy shit.
Oh boy.
That one of the things that you find irritating is when there's an empty coffee cup that people are pretending to be full. And the coffee cups in this show were empty. And this show literally takes place in a coffee shop. Like, that's the one production design detail. True. That's the one thing they had to do to make it authentic.
I can one up because this show had several instances of something that always gets me. Getting it out of the way, obviously, anybody who's been involved in film production knows that scenes with people eating is a pain in the ass, right?
Sure.
But they had so many pieces of business where somebody would be holding a cookie, put it to their mouth, and not eat it.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. And it's like, if you're going to make a show that is in a food service thing, you have to find a way to do it. That should be one of your priorities.
Exactly.
Just get some coverage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just figuring out how to do it.
One or two shots of somebody taking the bite.
Yeah. Suck it up and do it. It's
and if it's just a fucking cookie, they can have multiple cookies and replace them.
Yeah. Guess what? So what if you...
It's not a whole pizza.
Yeah. Sorry, you're going to do 4 takes of the shot.
Sorry, I got very angry about that.
Liberally, maybe you do 3 or 4 takes of the shot. You're saying the actor's not willing to take 4 bites of a cookie? They don't even have to eat 4 whole cookies. They can take one real bite and replace it with a new cookie. One real bite. You can totally do it. Have real coffee. Make it decaf if people don't want to drink tons of coffee.
Again, I always say it. You
Brown
don't
liquid,
even need
anything.
Yeah.
Water most of the time if it's got a lid.
If you got a cup with a lid, just put water in it.
I just finished a cup of coffee and now
I can tell it's empty. I can tell it's empty.
Because the way you're holding it, you can tell there's no weight to it.
Yeah, but now it's making me want more coffee and it's like, it's very kind of rainy and gloomy here in Toronto at the moment. And we're talking about a coffee shop and all I just want is coffee shop snacks.
So if anyone listening to this is in the midst of producing a TV show or movie that features beverage service, just know audiences can tell.
Yeah.
If a cup is empty, we can tell. Fill it with water. It's not hard.
Yeah. And you know who and you know who hates it more than anyone? Your editor. Because your editor has to look at it and is like, this is stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the easiest ways to cut from one camera to another, from one camera angle to another, is real physical movement in business that you can cut on. And you can tell when it's fake, and then you have to try to hide it instead of showing it off. Anyway, all right, episode 15. So, at this point, Craig Ferguson's character is mysteriously gone, but I will revise this to say that he's just missing from this one episode. And instead, we have Dane Cook playing a character who also sort of seems to work there, but it's not very clear based on this episode what he does.
He's a waiter.
And mercifully, he has minimal participation in the plot of this episode.
Did you mention the mullet?
No.
He also has a mullet.
That's true.
He does. And he, never mind. I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Moving on. The main thing going on here is that young Gracie has a boyfriend named Nicky. Nicky is friends with a bunch of other little boys who are a bunch of bratty punks. They behave obnoxiously at the coffee shop and everywhere, and Gracie doesn't like that Nicky is friends with them. Her mom wants to intervene as she is apparently acquainted with Nicky's dad, Nick Sr., which might sort of be a will they or won't they. It's not quite established in this episode, but from stuff that I researched, it might be.
It is.
Okay. Shirley, Betty White again, thinks it's a bad idea to get involved, that boys will be boys, as she says, and no parent wants to hear from another parent about how to deal with their kid. So,
True.
Gracie gets Nicky involved in a school play, and he actually gets kind of excited about it and demonstrates some talent. But when his friends see him in costume, they make fun of him and he quits instantly on the spot. So the episode is about Gracie convincing him not to go along with the pack, and meanwhile the interactions between Julia and Nick Sr., which initially goes poorly and he's offended, as Shirley predicted, but later he comes around and wants her help when he realizes that his son quitting the school play to sit on a dumpster behind a grocery store is actually kind of a bad thing.
I just want to say, that they're bad boys because they all wear a lot of plaid and have longer hair with middle parts.
Yeah.
That's like the 90s bad boy look.
Maybe some jean jackets.
Seriously, though, I hated these kids.
I know they were
fucking punks.
They were little shitheads.
Yeah.
I didn't like them either. This is the one time I sided with Marie Osmond's character.
Yeah.
I was just like, I would be like having a hard time with that too.
Keep your daughter away from these shitheads.
Young Brynn would have been like, if only someone could tame them.
Oh yeah, that's the problem. I would have been like Ashley Johnson. I would have been like, it's like a moth to
right.
Poor Nicky though. I mean, he's doing pretty well for somebody who has mysteriously time traveled from 1950s New York.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the accents.
Oh, hey, what we doing over here?
Okay, it's supposed to be outside of Philly, but yet they're all from New York. They're all
little Nicky Jr. is
and Nick Sr.
a character from 1950s Brooklyn.
Yeah, they're all just very
and there was one more thing that I wanted to add to set up the plot of this episode.
Okay.
Which is that when Gracie's trying to decide whether she should just go along with the pressure to hang out with these jean-jacketed dumpster boys, she goes to watch TV in the back office of the cafe. She watches an episode of Boy Meets World, and the characters in the show, legitimately played by Ben Savage and Ryder Strong, turn to the camera and speak directly to her, giving her advice to help with this situation. So it's both intertextual and metatextual simultaneously, which I will give props to.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. And the best was she's watching this episode, and me having watched so much Boy Meets World in my time, I'm like, this isn't a real episode.
Yeah.
Like, even before they turn to the camera and start talking to her.
It.
And the best,
I don't remember
but
this.
the best is like they go so they clearly enjoy themselves so much because, okay, so anybody out there who watched Boy Meets World, Sean Hunter, played by Ryder Strong, would get in all kinds of trouble, and Corey, played by Ben Savage, would always have his back because they were like brothers and like, best friends forever and all that. And in this one, the problem that Sean Hunter has had is that he's burned down the gym and killed somebody. And it's like, and I remember this being
extreme
I
remember
problem.
I'm watching this and I'm like, are they insinuating that Sean Hunter murdered somebody?
And then he's like, are you really going to stick by me through this? And he's like, of course I am. You're my best friend.
He's like, it's not you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But it also like towed the line so close that if you were only half paying attention to the dialogue, you would miss the line about him, like, about somebody dying in the fire, and just be like, oh, it's just a typical Boy Meets World episode.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It was pretty clever.
And the two, and the two of them are very, very funny in it.
Yeah.
Saves a pretty dull episode.
Yeah. In the 90s, at the time, if I had just been like watching TV and this show came on, scenes like that would have got me to keep watching it.
Yeah.
And like it starts going all blurry, and like Sean's like, what's going on? I can't see anything. And Corey's like, it's okay. It's just a special effect. It means we've done our job.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was all clever, but it was a little bit out of place in this show because this show didn't establish itself as that wacky.
Yeah, it didn't. At least, I mean, again, if we had watched all of the episodes in between,
maybe
who
there's
knows?
more.
But I did notice that in general, this show does things that are sometimes so on the nose that I'm like, maybe the joke is that it's so on the nose. Like they're doing a little bit of like parodying the genre while generally embracing the genre. Even the idea that like the bad boys, like the whole thing of like what they're trying to get Nikki to do instead of be in the play is we're gonna like the line, I had to write this down because the literal line is we're gonna hang out behind the grocery store. Like it's just the idea, and the whole dialogue exchange later is just like, well, you're not doing anything. Let me know when you actually do something. And the whole and they really like take it to its most basic components of like the bad kids just hang out and do nothing, and they just seem like aimless punks. And then he has like this potential that she sees in him, and he's going to be an actor in the theater. And it's almost like they took the cliches of these types of characters and said, what is the most basic, boil it down to its most basic component parts. How do you construct this type of plot?
Also very fun. So the play they're putting on is Peter Pan.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trope too, I think.
I think so. Or it's or it was what do you call it? Or what's it's in fair use. I think you can you can just use it. I think it's it's an open
public domain.
Public domain. But so we come in on it, and they're doing like a bit of a rehearsal where the drama teacher is trying to get the pirates like in the spirit of being pirates. And instantly obviously me, but like every pirate on stage has an eye patch. And I remember just being like, that's hilarious. Like every single pirate has an eye patch. And then of course the kid just keeps going, how did we all lose our eyes? And it was just...
I forgot about that line.
It was just such a little... This is something that kind of made Boy Meets World work better than it does, or better than it should, is that like this show has little bits of like silliness inserted in where it's like, there's just little hints of the writers' personalities coming in very off moments where like you can see that there's good writers here, just not doing, not on a project that they're able to really do a lot with. And like you have these little silly bits like, how did we all lose our eyes? That just kind of like, just kind of really sold. Okay, I like you guys. You guys are all right.
The moment for me that called that out was when she goes off to watch the show.
Yeah,
is like she's tormented by this sticky situation, and she just says, "I'm gonna go do what everybody else does and watch some TV," and then wanders off to the back room to watch TV. And I'm like, I can tell that's like a very writerly, like you can see the hand of the writer in that line of just like, I'm just gonna call out the fact that she's gonna watch TV and it's on a TV show.
And I did like. She keeps explaining. They're like, how did you figure all this out? And she's like, TV really does have stuff to say to us young kids. And like, I just picked it out of the airwaves. And like all the adults are just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Little meta lines like that really work for me.
Yeah. And the one thing that I genuinely laughed at outside of the whole Boy Meets World crossover was when Nick Sr. comes back to get advice.
Yeah.
And they're having that whole discussion like with a metaphor about cooking clams.
I love that.
When he jumps in and he's like, red sauce, what are you, out of your mind?
Yeah.
And he just starts going into a rant about the correct way to cook clams. And
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That was another moment that really worked for me. That was a moment where again, just some personality starts showing through in the writing where like the whole scene derails because he can't get back into it because red sauce was clams. What are you doing? A little butter and garlic?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, those were moments where I was like, now if the show just had like more of these moments. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It has the seasonings, but it doesn't have the main ingredients.
Or maybe you might say that this show was unfortunately cooked in a red sauce, which was not the right way to do it.
I mean, that's, arguments could be made about cooking clams in red sauce. I'm just saying, like, they're both fine. Depends on the mood you're in.
I suppose.
I would prefer, butter and garlic, but
yeah. I'm on team butter and garlic, maybe some white wine.
Teach their own.
What about a spicy arrabbiata?
Well, that would be a red sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I think it can work.
It can work.
I think it could work. I think it could work. And I think we could easily just
make
the rest
arguments
of
for all of it.
Just the rest of this episode could just be
how should you cook clams? Yeah. Oh boy.
What are you gonna order? Clams Casino. Really?
That's
Chef recommends.
Yeah. That is my favorite moment in that backwards episode where he's like got food poisoning and then it cuts to like 1 hour earlier. What can I get you? I'll have the Clams Casino.
Chef recommends.
All right, we should move on.
Oh, mercy.
So, Brynn, how would you like to connect? What the hell is this show called? Maybe this time. Hey, Brynn, how would you like to?
It's one thing when you don't remember last week's show, but when you don't remember the show that we're currently talking about.
You know what? I'm going to make this an official point. I'm going to make this an official point, though. Maybe this time, what's with the title of this show? What does that mean? It's not only is it not memorable,
but
I
really didn't get it. I didn't get it, and I also
this time. Maybe this time.
I really hated
this title.
I hated the animation on the opening title.
I think it's supposed to be about her fresh start. Maybe this time I'll get things right.
But the show is not even about a fresh start.
I know it's not.
We don't know a damn thing about her.
Yeah, it sounds like they've been in this position for a long time.
I know. It's not great.
Maybe this time, what? Like if she's going to get into a new relationship, this show doesn't even seem to be about someone who wants to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Anyway, Brynn, tell us how maybe this time connects with Friends.
Yeah, so it connects with Friends a bunch of ways. There's like a
I knew it.
Yeah, there's like a few 2-degree connections and 1-degree connection. Okay, so basically we'll start with Betty White. So you would think that there'd be a 1-degree connection, but there actually isn't. There's a couple 2-degree connections. So the first one I'll call out is that she had a recurring role on that 70s show as Kitty Foreman's mother. Kitty Foreman was played by Deborah Jo Rupp, and Deborah Jo Rupp had a recurring role on Friends as Alice Knight Buffet.
Of course.
Okay, so there's 1 2-degree connection. The next one is Betty White guest starred on Joey, which was the spinoff of Friends starring Matt LeBlanc, and of course Matt LeBlanc.
Who did he play?
He played Joey. Also,
Joey
on Friends.
On Friends.
All right.
How you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy.
What a laugh riot that was.
Yeah, and then
we should talk about that show. I know it breaks our rules a little, but I feel like we'd be really we'd be missing out not watching a few episodes.
Yeah,
of that.
we'll see. Maybe we'll graduate to the like early aughts because I feel like there is a lot of gold in that era, the early
what we
2000s.
could do is we can do a semi non-canonical mini series within our podcast.
Nah, I just say we just move into the aughts at some point.
But then how far in?
Yeah.
No, I well, let's put it this way. I would say maybe we cut off around 2005.
Okay.
But if we happen to do this show for another 5 years,
we
can push it to 2010, you know?
Yeah.
So you're saying every couple years we earn another
decade,
half decade or something.
Yes, that's exactly. Yes.
Guys, we're getting off track. Let's get back
Us
to this.
Off track?
Yeah. All right. So the next round of connections is through Amy Hill.
Great.
Okay. So she, of course, played Kay O'Hara on Maybe This Time. She also guest starred on Friends. And the credit is just called The Woman on, and the episode's called The One with All the Candy.
Okay.
And I don't have any more information, but I kind of want to watch the episode because she's great.
Great.
So 1 degree.
Oh, yeah.
That's
okay.
a 1
so
degree.
Okay.
And then there's a couple more 2-degree connections. So Amy Hill also guest starred on Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which starred Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry was, of course, Chandler Bing on Friends.
Studio 60 comes up a lot.
It does come up a lot.
If I haven't mentioned it recently, I fucking love Studio 60.
I know. We all know you loved Studio 60. It was like one of your shows. Okay. And, this other one, you guys are going to really love this one because Amy Hill also guest starred on Mad About You.
Oh, dear.
Which co-starred Lisa Kudrow as, who do you guys think she played on Mad About You?
Ursula Buffet.
Stacy?
No. Yes, it was Ursula Buffet, who, of course, is the twin sister of the character Phoebe Buffet, who is one of the main stars of Friends.
Cool.
Also played by Lisa Kudrow, so there's your other 2-degree connection. And you know what? There probably was more than that, but that's all I felt like getting into.
That's pretty thorough.
But that's pretty thorough, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent.
As for the spin-off, where does this stacked cast go from here?
I mean, I feel like everyone listening who is a fan of TV and pop culture just like knows what everybody got up to after this. Like everybody basically continued to have very successful careers. We'll get Marie Osmond out of the way first of all. So, after Maybe This Time, I think she kind of was like, maybe sitcoms are not my thing. So she kind of like reclaimed her status as like a TV personality of like a kind of certain wholesome nature. And she immediately jumped into like Broadway basically after this. And she starred in I think on Broadway, but also mostly a touring production of Maria in The Sound of Music, which I think is like, you know, the perfect choice for her. Very similar to the move her brother made in the mid-90s of being the star of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Like, yeah. Like, they both had this thing where they were
the
like...
one from the commercials.
Yeah. So, oh my God, those were like all over the place in the 90s.
Yep.
And yeah, so she went on to star in lots of musicals. But she also appeared as herself many times so I think it became a thing where she's like, I just have to be me. I just have to be me in stuff because people know who I am. So she would pop up in lots of other scripted and non-scripted TV. And some of it could have been clips from her old shows where she was like young on her variety show. But anyway, she just kind of played herself a lot for many years. She and her brother Donnie had a very brief like stint as co-hosts of a daytime talk show. And then she briefly hosted her own talk show. And she also went back to the scripted world doing a few like kind of Hallmark style Christmas movie of the week.
There you go. That's a good fit.
Like,
that's a good fit.
I think after, you know, like, and who knows, this is purely speculation on my part, but it, you know, what you could gather is that she maybe was like, oh no, I'm not gonna be in like sitcoms with these like very funny people. I'm just gonna know my audience and know my lane.
I like how you're like, Marie Osmond was done with sitcoms. I think sitcoms were done with Marie Osmond.
Yeah, maybe.
Little do we know she's one of our biggest fans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe. Who knows?
Sorry, Marie.
I mean, you're a very harmless person as far as I can tell. You seem like a very nice person. So sorry if we've been a little bit hard on you.
I met Donny Osmond when I was a kid.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I was, long story short, I appeared on a TV show on TV Ontario where he was like the main guest, and I was one of the.
You told me this story.
Where it's like a bunch of kids interviewing a celebrity, and I was one of the kids who
got
to ask him a question or whatever.
You were probably so precocious. I could just picture it.
I like sat.
Mr. Osmond.
I sat next to him.
Didn't he give you a noogie or something?
He put me in a headlock and gave me a noogie.
Yeah.
I got his autograph. He was very friendly. He was a very nice guy.
Yeah. I think they are just like nice people. They're just squeaky clean people. You know?
I think maybe like going back to the show, like I guess on paper, it probably made sense at the time to take this very famous person who's like wholesome and nice and surround them with a bunch of characters who are edgier. It just didn't work. But
yeah,
I guess I can kind of understand why they thought it would.
Yeah. So Craig Ferguson, I could talk about this guy all day. I just, you know, like he's the greatest. Like, so soon after, one thing I want to call out really quickly because it kind of unlocked childhood memories was he was like did a bunch of voices on the cartoon Freakazoid. Do you guys remember Freakazoid?
He did. He did.
That show was very funny. That was like one of my earliest, you know, comedy favorites as a kid. I thought I would like roar laughing.
Him and Ed Asner did a lot of voices on that.
So very soon after this show ended, he was cast in the Drew Carey Show as Drew's boss, Mr. Wick. Mm-hmm. And he was on that show off and on from 96 to 2004. So he had a great run on there.
I watched a lot of Drew Carey show.
Yeah, me too.
He was very funny on it.
Yeah, I might have to do a Drew Carey rewatch soon. And then he wrote and starred in an indie movie called Saving Grace, which looks very interesting. And I think I'll be checking that out soon. From 2004 to 2014, many of you will probably know him as the host of the Late Late Show on CBS. And, you know, he was known for being, you know, very earnest in his monologues. And one that's been making the round in recent years is from like 2007, where he was defending Britney Spears and calling everybody out for like making fun of her and all of this. And like, it's like a very, like it was making the rounds throughout the, you know, kind of like Free Britney moment we've been having, because he was just very like, let's stop making fun of vulnerable people. Let's make fun of, he calls out making fun of Trump of all people and like the powerful people in our society instead of like vulnerable young women. Like, and I was like, holy shit, he is the best.
He was great. He had some of his monologues when he would really get down. Like he was something real special on late night TV.
He was very, very special. And
he didn't script his interviews, which would often make for very weird interviews.
Yes.
But he didn't let you come in with like, you didn't get to come in with like a pre-made story with like all your punchlines. You'd have a conversation and oftentimes get really weird.
He's a very authentic person. And I think that's kind of been his like legacy. You know, after this, his time as the host there, he had a recurring role in Hot in Cleveland where he got to reunite with Betty White. And he's done lots of like voice work since. Basically any Scottish character in a kid's movie, he's done the voice. Like both How to Train Your Dragon and Brave.
Yeah, I was like, he was the dad in Brave, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he moved back to Scotland and he like lives in Scotland full time, but he's, you know, he just seems like a real dude. And I'd love to have a beer with him one of these days.
And it's worth
noting. It'll never happen, but I would love to.
Well, he would not have that beer.
Oh, right. He's sober. He's sober because he famously had a very serious, you know.
Yeah, he was very open about his addiction issues.
I read one of his memoirs too, I think. Now that I'm thinking of it. Yeah. But he's just one of the great dudes.
Okay, so you could have a cuppakino with him.
I could have a cuppakino, yeah.
And like his accent, in addition to being very thick in this show, is like musical. Like it's a very delightful voice.
Yeah, and it's awesome because he's English on Drew Carey.
Yes.
So we don't really get to hear the greatness of his true accent on that. But this is, it's like silk.
All right. And on the other hand, there's Dane Cook.
Next.
Yeah, exactly. Next. Yeah. I mean, yeah. He basically became like the frat boy, like humor guy of the like early 2000s. Very odd time in pop culture. And we don't have to talk about him much. He has a fair share of controversies, which people are free to like look up. But yeah, it was very odd to see him because I didn't think he was even around in that time, but apparently he was. And then we have Amy Hill, who's incredible, and her like body of work is like overwhelming. Like she has like 193 IMDb credits. Like she's just like legendary. As Aaron mentioned, one of like a memorable early role was playing Frank Costanza's long lost love from his time in Korea, and like it's a very funny episode. You know, again, she appeared in Friends and like many of the very successful shows of the time. I'll just read like some of the shows she's appeared in or recurred in. So The Hughleys, Third Rock from the Sun, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Frasier, Desperate Housewives, Grey's Anatomy. Most recently, she co-starred on the Magnum PI reboot. So she's kind of like gone across several genres of TV. She can basically do anything and everything. She's just like one of those people who's been working and you've seen her in something. Like you've absolutely seen her in something. She may not be a household name, but she is like just an icon. And then we also have Ashley Johnson, who we've talked about a fair amount on this show because she's just, she's like this great child actor of the 90s. She was Chrissy Seaver on The Growing Pains and continued to be a successful young performer. She was great in this show in Maybe Next Time. She's starred in a fair amount of TV and films.
She was in Phenom.
Yeah, she was in Phenom.
She was.
Yes. And now she does like tons of voice work. She reunited with Ross Malinger, who played Nikki, her little boyfriend, when they both were voices of characters on Recess. So, you know, but she famously like does a lot of voice work for a lot of like video games, and she's just great.
Well, she is very famously, she is Ellie from The Last of Us, which is probably the pinnacle of video game acting.
Yes.
So she's wonderful. She's on a procedural right now too.
Yeah. What else? Okay, so
Blind Spot, I think it is.
So I already mentioned Ross Malinger. He was like another very successful, like these two were like very successful child actors of the 90s and were in everything. He was in, we talked about him a bit in our Good Advice episode because he played Shelley Long's character's son. He was in like Kindergarten Cop, Roseanne, Davis Rules, which none of our listeners like, but whatever. Sleepless in Seattle. He plays Adam Lippman in the Serenity Now episode of Seinfeld. Like, just, out there. Robert Cicchini, who played his father, Nick Sr., has been working steadily ever since as well. He's played a character named Nick or Nikki multiple times, which is kind of funny. Notable credits of his include Providence, 24, Murder in the First, and most recently The Morning Show. And last but not least, we have the incredible, iconic Betty White. Like, what can you really say about Betty White? Like, she's just Betty White.
We've gotten to talk about her a lot, and it never gets old.
It never gets old. Her very first, the one fun fact is her next credit after this show, maybe this time, or maybe this time, maybe next time, whatever the fuck it's called. Her next role is that incredible guest starring role on the John Larroquette show, the Here We Go Again episode.
Amazing.
Nice.
So that's, so she kind of redeemed she didn't have to redeem herself, but she got to be in a better show after.
Yeah.
Okay. And then since then, she's appeared in like hundreds of things, like, movies including Lake Placid, Ally McBeal, Providence, where she reunited with Robert Cicchini, guest starred as a character. Okay, so she had her recurring role on that 70s show as Kitty Foreman's mom, which I have to say is perfect casting.
Mm-hmm.
She's also in The Practice, Malcolm in the Middle, Boston Legal, The Bold and the Beautiful, which is random, but like, that's just Betty White. She could literally be in any kind of media, like any kind of like genre, much like Amy Hill, I would say. Like both of them could be in any type of show and just really shine. She's also in 30 Rock. She's also in Community. And then she had like a long, fun stint on the show Hot in Cleveland. And yeah, I mean, she's just like, I'm very sad that she didn't make it to her 100th birthday. Like, she had a couple weeks.
2 weeks.
It's just, but what a career, what a legacy. Like, nobody out there can say a bad thing about Betty White. And, I think she left the world a little better than, what's the expression? She left the world better than when she was in it.
And when she entered it, or?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Producer is still on the road, but he said he had time for a quick call today. So let's give him a call.
Hey, fella, how's it going?
Very well. Thanks for asking, Mr. Producer.
So, what are we talking about this week? I gotta warn you, I may have to duck out early.
Oh, well, that's okay. Today we're chatting about Maybe This Time.
Ah, sure. It's my favorite tune in the whole show. I gotta say, I love Minnelli's take on it best. Brings tears to my eyes.
What?
He's talking about Cabaret.
Oh, well, no, that's not,
I know, kid, I'm just slicing your bread. Maybe this time. Betty White, Donny Osmond, Craig Kilborn.
Marie Osmond, and wrong late host.
Right. Ferguson, funny guy. Erratic, though.
Did you have any insights on this one?
Oh, sure. I mean, we were shooting a show on the lot at the same time, actually. We were neighbors.
What were you making at that point?
Well, we were trying to crack a Full House spinoff called Woodchuck.
Wasn't that the puppet?
Indeed. Went through 7 pilots. Just couldn't get the damn supporting cast right. Dynamite puppet, though. Easily top 5 puppet performers I've ever had the pleasure of working with.
So you were around the Maybe This Time production then?
I was. They put out a hell of a spread. Their caterer was Matty Madhouse Ronaldson. The man could grill a cheese like no one's business. And the crudité selection, top notch.
And the show itself?
Mostly run-of-the-mill stuff. Actors being actors, Betty White being a class act. Mostly,
You were just there stealing pickles, weren't you?
Yes, mostly, yes. Madhouse really knew how to stack them. I'm talking gherkins, bread and butter, molasses maple, half sours, full sours.
All right, I think maybe that's it for...
Dang it, kid. I gotta get going anyway. I got a reading coming up. And after that, a very special dinner.
Oh, right, you're still on the road, right?
I am. I gotta be honest. I've been taking some meetings while we're out here. Big things are happening. Can't say nothing yet, but I'll have some news soon.
Oh, well, that sounds great. Wait, one more thing.
Yeah.
Did you just try making Ranger Joe, Dave Coulier, Mr. Woodchuck?
Well, shit. That probably would have worked. I gotta go. Bye.
Well, I'm glad his tour is going well, and I'm looking forward to finding out what new project he has cooking up. Do either of you have any leftovers?
Nah, I'm good.
That's a hell no from me.
I got a couple really little things.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. One is in that plot from the pilot, the whole thing of like how their rent hasn't gone up in 20 years. Now, this is like a very relevant discussion for today where like rent's going up to huge amounts, pushing small businesses out of their properties and stuff like that. It's a very real problem. But the idea...
I'm sure they intended it to be a very serious discussion.
Yeah, the idea that the rent hasn't gone up at all in 20 years is so absurd that it makes it harder to like follow the logic of where
they're a small town. They're friends with the landlord. I don't know.
I guess, but
It's the 90s.
It's the 90s.
it's just the idea that what's even the main character, like Marie Osmond's character, what's her name?
Julia.
The fact that Julia is
Is
shocked.
it Julia? I think it's Julia.
Sure, let's just say Julia. The fact that she's shocked that the rent would go up it's weird that she's shocked that it would. Like, in other words, she should be shocked that it never has before. And I get that she would be upset that it would go up so much all at once. But like, if she is the knowledgeable business person that she claims to be, then anyway, just sitcom logic. The other little thing is
Just for the audience out there, I love you guys don't get to enjoy it as much as I do, but Aaron always does have like
pages and
pages of
notes.
printouts that he staples together, and like
It's very profesh.
Yeah. And it's a real thing. Like it's if for all the audience out there, I mean, Aaron shows up, he's got his stacks of pages printed out neatly.
Yeah.
Bryn's got a legal pad with some notes jotted down.
It's nonsense, but
and I occasionally look at something on my phone.
Yeah. I guess I don't have any other leftovers.
This whole exchange is staying in the episode.
That Was a Show is created and hosted by Brynn Burney, Andrew Barry Helmer, and myself, Aaron Yeager. It's a production of Radio Gizmo in Toronto, Canada. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. Follow us on Instagram and tell your friends about it. That Was a Show?
Radio Gizmo.